You're listening to Talking to Teens, where we speak with leading experts from a variety of disciplines about the art and science of parenting teenagers. I'm your host, Andy Earle. Today, we are here with Dr. Lisa Damour. She is the author of 2 New York Times best-selling books on raising teenage girls. Her first book is Untangled, guiding the teenage girls through the 7 transitions into adulthood, and her new book is called Under Pressure, confronting the epidemic of stress and anxiety in girls. Dr. Damour writes the monthly adolescence column for the New York Times. She serves as a regular contributor to CBS News. She has a private psychotherapy practice, and she serves as the executive director of Laurel School's Center for Research on Girls. Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so for the people who don't already know about you, can you give us a little background on you and your latest book?
So I got my PhD in 1997, so I've been a fully practicing psychologist for more than 20 years, and of course I was working, doing clinical work before I got my PhD. So I've sort of been at this for a while, and I've taken care of adolescent girls as most of the work that I do for a long time. And about 10 years ago, something shifted in what I was hearing from girls. And this was true both in my private practice, and then also I consult 2 days a week at a girls' school in our community called Laurel School, where I get to see girls in some ways much more in their natural environment, during the school day with their friends, around adults, and teachers. And so in both of those settings, I started to hear about 10 years ago girls and also parents talking about anxiety. My daughter has anxiety. My daughter has tremendous stress. She suffers from anxiety. And that felt like a shift from what we'd heard before, that I hadn't heard anxiety as sort of such a central and constant focus in conversations about how girls were doing. And what I can say is that transition, that shift to talking about anxiety has only accelerated. It now feels like it's very broad, and we hear about it all the time. And I had written Untangled about just normal adolescent development, and then was thinking about, what feels necessary next. And it just felt so clear that we needed to try to wrap our hands around this question of where all this anxiety and stress is coming from, and then also what we as adults who care for girls can do to address it and to make it better for girls.
The first kind of really interesting point that I had marked in this book is that you kind of talk about how that anxiety isn't always necessarily bad, and the first thing we can do is help our daughters take control of their anxiety. You say we can teach them that anxiety is often their friend.
This is, for me, if people take nothing from the book, what I want them to take is that we see stress and anxiety, and by we, I mean psychologists. We've always seen this. Stress and anxiety as normal, healthy functions. The way psychologists have always understood anxiety is that this is an alarm system, and it tells us when we need to pay attention and when we need to keep ourselves safe. And so, for example, if you're driving and somebody near to you is swerving, you should have an anxiety response. Your alarm should go off, and you should become uncomfortable. And it's the discomfort of the anxiety that will compel you to take steps to address it. And so if you get an anxious response when someone's swerving, and then you think, okay, I'm changing lanes to get away from this person, that's anxiety doing its job.
And you have to care about something to get anxious about it, right? Like if you didn't care about it, there wouldn't have any anxiety. It's like the kid before the test who just doesn't care. He's not anxious about it, but he's not really working that hard to study. And
Exactly, right? And so So anxiety works both for external threats, like swerving cars, and it works for internal threats. It works for, I've got a test coming up. And when I meet with girls and they say, I'm super anxious about this test that's coming, I'll say, well, have you studied? And they say no. And I say, well, good, you're having the right reaction. Like, you should be anxious, right? You don't want to show up.
Right.
You don't want to show up unprepared. But then even the point you make, we know that anxiety also improves performance. We know that some tension makes people do a better job. And so we don't want kids, even if they've prepared for a test, you actually don't want a kid in a total Zen state on the way into a test, or a performance or a competition. You want them to have a sense of being revved a little bit, because we see that actually helps them do better. And so, most of it's good. It's good when it's protective. It's good when it gets your juices flowing. It's good when it makes you do something that you were putting off or not taking seriously. Mm-hmm. And yes, it can also be bad, right? And I do, I think it's hard for anyone to take psychologists seriously if we do nothing but cheer for anxiety.
Right.
Right? So I say, here's when it's bad. It's bad when the alarm makes no sense. It's bad if you have this kind of nagging alarm that is going off all of the time, but there's nothing wrong, right? We don't like that. Sure. And we don't like the alarm if it's hugely out of proportion to what's going on. So we don't like panic attacks over quizzes, right? Like that makes no sense.
Yeah,
up to that point,
right.
It's good anxiety.
So but what you're saying here sounds like most of the time, for most of the things that you're dealing with, where you're feeling anxious about them, or where your teenager is feeling anxious about something that's coming up, it's actually probably a good thing. You have a lot of really, really insightful kind of things you could say, which is funny, because what we've been really finding with parents here is that one of the most helpful things is just examples of what you could say in different situations. And you got a lot of great ones here about anxiety and examples of what you've said to students that you were working with. One that I thought was really cool was you talk about this girl who's really anxious about a piano recital that's coming up. And so then, you kind of get her to agree that, well, okay, yeah, it's not all bad. But then your kind of solution is well, how can we sort of start to work her towards the piano recital? What are the little things that she could do, the baby steps or something like that? How do you find those, and how do you kind of help push your teenager towards the thing that they're anxious about in those kind of baby step ways?
So this gets to something else that really is what drove me to write the book. We have this, completely well understood, kind of principle in our field that the thing that is most likely to heighten anxiety is actually avoidance, right? Which is, of course, people's first instinct. So in that scenario, this is a girl who's scared of going to her piano recital, so she doesn't want to go. She wants to be let out of it. And it's very easy as a parent to think oh, it's not that big a deal, or just this once, or, she seems so upset and I can make her feel so much better if I just say, okay, fine, we'll just call in sick. And everything we know on the academic side is this is going to make it way worse. And we know why it makes it worse. And what it does, if we just go to really basic, reinforcement principles in psychology, two things happen at once when you avoid a feared thing. So the first thing is you feel great, right? So you go from anxiety.
I don't have to do that, right?
Exactly. And anxiety is miserable enough that if something comes in and just wipes it out, that's a really powerfully reinforcing moment.
Yeah.
So what that sets up is the next recital, here comes the anxiety, and here comes the wait, no, give me that fabulous relief I had before, right? So you're setting the table for future avoidance. But then the other thing, and this is why it becomes such a such an entrenched pattern, is that when people avoid what they fear, they never discover that they probably could have managed it, right? So if I am frightened of dogs and I cross the street every time a dog comes near me, I never meet a nice dog. And they remain as, horrifying in my mind as I've ever created them. So if this kiddo doesn't show up at the recital, recitals remain this huge, daunting, overwhelming thing, and they get bigger every time she avoids them, as opposed to if we can find a way to get her like there, right? And I'll come back to this sort of baby step piece. Then she might be like, oh, wait, that wasn't a big a deal after all, or oh, I was uncomfortable, but I could handle it. When we need people to approach things they'd rather avoid, when we need people to go against their instinct, which is, to run from something that's frightening, what really does help is to explain everything I just explained here, right? To say, here's why that will make it worse. And I will say to kids, I'll say, look, avoiding this is a phenomenal short-term solution to the problem. It is a terrible long-term solution, right? You're going to make the long-term much, much worse. And so then once they see how they're actually making it way worse in the long run if they avoid it in the short term, then you can say, look, you don't have to get on the stage, do the whole recital. You don't have to do that. You need to engage it somehow. Can you go? Can you go and then figure out once you get there what you're going to do? Can you go and can you listen to everybody else? Can you talk with your piano teacher about if there's a way that you can go to the place where the recital is going to be held and practice once there and see how it feels? But that's where it's really fun, and that's where psychologists get to be creative. Like, what bearable version of this can you engage? And the other thing we do, and this gets sort of lost in the panic around anxiety, we can teach people how to control their anxiety when it comes around, right? We can teach them.
Yeah.
Here, you're going to get there and it's going to feel crummy. Here are all your strategies. And of course, like high on the list are things like breathing and muscle relaxation, which really work. And sometimes you have to show people how they really work, but they really work. So it's not like we're saying like, throwing people overboard and saying like, well, good luck, right? We're going to throw them overboard. We're going to teach them how to swim in that anxiety. And then we're going to see how deep they can get into the pool.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like there are so many times in your life where you are not sure if you can do something or where you surprise yourself. And if you let your teenager off the hook all the time whenever they're feeling anxious, then they miss out on those opportunities to, push themselves and surprise themselves with what they're able to do. Does the idea of getting a job stress your teen out? Check out my friends over at Teen Job Prep. They've created a one-stop shop just for teens. Need a resume? No problem. Teen Job Prep makes it easy with their custom resume builder designed especially for teens with little or no experience. Just answer a few simple questions and your teen will have a professional resume in minutes. Not sure how to get a job? No problem. Teen Job Prep's fun and engaging animated video training will teach them everything they need to know, from how to find a job, how to apply for a job, how to ace an interview, and, most importantly, how to keep a job. Teen Job Prep gives your teen the tools and confidence they need to land a job that's right for them. Don't let stress and anxiety get in the way of your teen's future. Let Teen Job Prep help. Check out teenjobprep.com and enter the code TALKINGTOTEENS to get 15% off your order. That's teenjobprep.com and the code is TALKINGTOTEENS for 15% off your order. There's a couple words that you mention in your book that you use a lot when you're talking about this kind of stuff, and the two words are stinks and handle. Why are these such popular words for you, and do you recommend parents use them as well?
Yes. Okay, so these for me have changed my practice. Like if you said like, Lisa, you only get two words to work with in your whole clinical practice, I go like, leave me stinks and handle. Okay, so what we're up against, right, is the sense that you're not supposed to feel anxious and anxiety is bad. And what we're also up against is the fact that it is quite uncomfortable, that, bad things happen, stress feels bad, anxiety feels bad. And it's very easy for people to make the leap that if this doesn't feel good, it can't be good for me, right? Which I get where people start with that, but then I always think, yeah, well, exercise doesn't feel good, and we know it's good for you, right? Everybody knows. So you can't use the fact that it's uncomfortable as a sign that it's, not permissible.
Right. Brussels sprouts are great for you too, yeah.
Brussels sprouts are great for you, right? There's lots of things in life that we know are good for you that you may or may not enjoy, or that may be flat out unpleasant, right? And that's a thing that I think we need to revisit because there has been this shift in the culture. And I worry that there has been this, kind of selling of this idea that you're supposed to feel good all the time, right? Which, like, no generation before us ever thought this. That this is not something that I think is a very useful idea. It may even be a very harmful idea. So to bring it back to those words, so when kids and teenagers tell me about something that was awful, right? They got cut from the team, they got in a terrible fight with their friend, they got a flat tire, they felt bad, they got upset about something. Often the unspoken message and what they're saying to me is, I felt bad. I shouldn't have felt bad. Like, there's something wrong that I even felt bad. And I don't feel that way. I feel like, feeling bad's part of, like, getting out of bed. Like, at some point in the day, you're probably going to feel bad. And so what I say back to them is, that stinks, right? That stinks. And I rest on it. And what I hope my unspoken message is, here's a ton of empathy, but I have no problem with the fact that occurred to you. Right? Like, or I fully accept that stuff like this is going to go down. And so in saying stinks, I'm stopping there. I'm saying, I'm going to give you empathy. I'm doing nothing to try to fix this or undo it.
Right. I'm not jumping into how dare they mode. Yeah. Right.
Exactly. Right. Like, oh man, that stinks. And it's kind of got that, other unspoken messages like, oh yeah, stuff like that happens.
Oh man, stuff like that happens to me too. Yeah.
So you don't have to say all that, but oh yeah, that one, that stinks, right? Like, that's all in there.
Yeah, so, right.
First you do that, and then you move into the question of whether it's in the sort of bucket of stuff they could possibly manage, right? And the way, for me, all the back thinking on this is like, okay, life comes in two categories. Things that are life and annoying and frustrating, and most of things that stink, and things that are full-on crises, right? And there are crises. Most of what kids bring when they're feeling very, very distressed is in the handle bucket. So I sort of try to, like, articulate that, oh, this is not a crisis. This is in the handle bucket. So I will say to kids like, oh, man, that really stinks that you didn't make the team. Like, I know you wanted that. And then I'll pause and I'll say, how can we help you handle this? And it's a vote of confidence of this is in your capacity to manage and not enjoy, right? Nor does it require an adult to call the coach and make a thing of it. I'm here to help you find a way to weather it. And that those two words, in my experience, economically do so much work.
So another section is about helping girls dealing with situations with boys. And there's a really cool part of this where you're talking about situations that are kind of murky because people are more complicated than they are on TV, and it's not just always so obvious that someone is doing something that is crossing the line. So how do you, as a parent, kind of prepare teenage girls to deal with those like murky situations with boys where they feel like that's not really okay with me, but I'm not really sure if that's something I should make a big deal about?
I'm really glad we're talking about it. I will tell you, this was the hardest part of the book to write because I wade into, like you say, really murky waters. And one would really rather not. It exposes you to like critique, and it raises questions about the strength of one's feminism. Right? I mean, like it's easier in some ways to stick to the dogma. But so here's the dogma, and I think this is what you're referring to. And I've been part of this dogma, is that when we talk with young women about the physical side of their romantic lives, we talk about these moments where they may be engaged in something, making out with somebody, and it starts to go to a place they don't want to go. And we say to them, in those moments, you need to say no. You need
Just
to say,
no.
no,
Right.
this is not what I want. And this is really well-meaning advice, right? The idea behind it being it's crystal clear, there's no wiggle room for interpretation. And then also, and I hate to say this, but I know this is part of what informs our advice to young women is, when these things end up in court,
Exactly, right.
do,
or just the judiciary process of your college or anybody who's looking at it later on.
Exactly. One of the critical questions is going to be, did you say no? So this is where advice comes from. And this is why I gave it for years and years myself. Okay, but then I'm sitting with my own client, and I'm talking to colleagues who sit with similar clients, and here's what we keep hearing. We keep hearing from fabulous, smart, totally know themselves, know what they're doing young women, that they were in romantic situations where things started to go down a path they didn't want to go, and they were very well aware in the moment that it was a path they didn't want to go, and yet they could not, and they knew the advice, they knew what they were supposed to do in finger quotes, and they could not say the word. And in unpacking it, there were two reasons come up that they can't say the word. And these reasons, it turns out, have been explored in the linguistic literature and are backed by people who look at language and the impact of language. So the first reason is that they actually like the person. They like the guy. They are building a relationship with the guy, or would like to have an ongoing building relationship with the guy. And they are aware to say to someone no is actually a very rare thing. There's actually highly developed what linguists call refusal strategies that every culture has. And so, and they're very well prescribed, and everybody knows them, even if we're not conscious of them. So the American refusal strategy is, if I invite you to my dinner party and you don't want to come, the first thing you will do is you will pause. The next thing you will do is you'll say, oh, thank you so much for thinking of me. The next thing you will do is you will offer me an excuse. But I'm so bummed. We already have plans that night, right? And then the fourth thing you will do is you will say like I'm so sorry. Okay. So that's like, it has a little bit of variance, but that is the American strategy for refusal.
Yeah.
If I invite you to my dinner party, if I say, hey, would you like to come to my dinner party, and you said no, right? Like that would be a bizarre thing to do, and it would be perceived in our culture as really hostile, really rude, and basically relationship rupturing, right? I mean, like would you maintain a friendship with somebody, right? So, and then refusal strategies are very, very culturally bound, and so I don't know much about this, but I know in Japan there are refusal strategies where there are yeses that are understood to be nos, right? I mean, it's a really elaborate thing.
Sure.
So here we have one situation. The girl likes the guy and doesn't want to blow up the relationship.
Yeah.
And so we've only given her an option that in our culture does that. Okay, so that's one reason why they don't use no. Another reason is, like I said, it is an aggressive move, right? It is antagonizing, right? If I say to you, do you want to come to my dinner party? And you're like, no. I mean, you're almost starting a fight. And the other reason girls would say is, I was scared. I was scared in that moment. And so there's this phenomenal linguist named Deborah Cameron, and she has studied this. And what she says is, why would we urge young women who may feel threatened to use a strategy that is widely received in our culture as antagonistic, to basically anger someone who has more power and maybe really charged up sexually, in this moment. Mm-hmm. So it's not, while it sounds great for us to say it in a classroom or in our guidance to girls when we're talking in the abstract.
Yeah, it feels really empowering, to say no, be strong.
But put it on the ground, and it doesn't work in two situations that are actually pretty decently likely. Either she likes the person and doesn't want to blow up the relationship, or this has started to go down a path that's frightening and she doesn't want to antagonize the person.
It's kind of like the misconception that we have about how sexual assault happens. Like, it's not some stranger. If it's some person on the street or something who is like in a dark alley trying to assault you, then say no, stop. Like, that would make sense, right? But like, that's not how sexual assault happens. Like, it's somebody that you know, it's somebody that you're even dating, and you don't want to just completely blow up the relationship. Like, you want to do something that lets them know you're not okay with what's happening, but still, like, preserves that relationship going forward.
Exactly. And often, taking care of college-age women, and also, I mean, it's not just college, it's high school. The other thing we forget is, okay, you may or may not want to have an ongoing relationship with this person, but you're all part of the same social network. So if you blow it up with this guy, right, this actually has widespread ramifications for who you hang out with at all next Saturday night. I mean, it's really, really it gets very, very knotted.
Especially if it's someone popular, and yeah, right.
Exactly. So the one place where no probably works is where both parties are using what we call affirmative consent, where like at every step of the way, the parties say, like, would you like this to happen, right? And then you can say no, right? And but that I would love to think that was going on all the time. That'd be great if that's what's going on all the time. We also have to plan for other, probably much more likely possibilities.
Right, yeah.
So what I have started to say to girls is that no is one option, but they have other options too. And so what I say to them is, you can say that it's not what you want in a wide variety of ways. You can't be equivocal. You can't say, I'm not sure I want to do this, right? That is too soft.
Yeah, I don't think
say,
so.
Look,
right.
Yeah, you can say, look, I'm really into this. I don't want to do that, right? Like, that is an acceptable first pass at this. Like, I'm really into this, but I don't want to do that. Is a way to say, I don't want this, but I like you, right? That you can have the two together, or some version of that. The other thing that I have watched girls do successfully, and for me what matters is the success of the strategy, is that they will say, oh my gosh, I just forgot. I told a friend I would meet her. I have to go. And that has, for some girls, gotten them out of situations where they didn't want to do it and they were scared about how it would be received, or worried that it would be taken personally. And that gave them cover to immediately end the interaction without hurting the feelings or antagonizing the person they were turning down. And so what I like to think about is to say to girls, look, you have a whole toolbox of communication strategies at your disposal, right? So like, that's a hammer, right? If you're in a bar and some random dude shows up, right, and starts, like, being gross on you, say whatever you want to him. You don't know him.
Yeah.
You are safe. You are, you can lay it down in, really, brutal terms if you want. That's one tool in your toolbox. You also may have your canned air, where you say to someone, this is so fun. I really enjoy this. I hope we can hang out another time. I don't want to do this tonight, right? That is another option. And I feel like we have to acknowledge that young women are going to find themselves in a huge variety of situations, that communication is incredibly context-driven, and they need to have a lot of tools at their disposal.
We're here with Dr. Lisa Damour talking about stress, anxiety, and teenage girls. And we're not done yet. Here's a look at what's coming up in the second half of the show.
Boys care about their relationships and girls care about their relationships. Girls are socialized by our culture to be concerned about the needs of others, to address the needs of others, and make themselves available to meet the needs of others. So for girls more than boys, it is hard to turn people down. So the parent may not actually have, in the moment, the capacity to be like, here are all the things that are off the table if you don't do this now. You may not know that. But if the kid knows the parent well enough and the parent is predictable enough, the kid's like, I have a pretty good sense of where this is going to come home to roost, then it to me seems like a workable system.
Should we tell our daughters that they're beautiful?
This is so difficult. Okay, so of course, yes. At some level, like, I can't help it, right? I'm like, I just, when you're a parent, you're like, oh my God, you look so cute. But one of the things that I started to have more qualms about is the everyone is beautiful reassurances that we sometimes give girls, where we say, like, all bodies are beautiful, all forms of beauty are beautiful. There's, beauty is wide-ranging. Okay, so I'm kind of agnostic on the question of whether or not that's true. Here's what I do know. Girls don't buy it, right? When we say, all bodies are beautiful, you can see them. They're like, oh, come on. We all know which bodies are in magazines and which bodies are not in magazines. They are, right? And so I feel like...
And who's getting attention from boys and who's not at school, and who's like, come on, it's obvious. Yeah, right.
Come on, right? So I feel like, first of all, whatever else, you lose them. So you can't do anything good if you've lost them. But then the other thing that has started to weigh on me about those reassurances is that we're still talking about appearance.
How do you balance, find the right number of teachable moments and not turn into the parent who is trying to just turn everything into one?
It's a tough one, right? Because it feels like there's so many moments where you're just like, I just want to tell you this. What I would say is a lot of parenting comes down to what you don't say and how good you are at biting your tongue. And I would not want parents to underestimate the positive benefits of keeping their mouth shut. That if you're always giving lessons, then your kid's going to tune you out. And then when you do say something, it's not going to have much meaning. So I would say for sure pick your moments. And then I would also say engage that mature side of your teenager before you start.
Want to hear the full interview? Sign up for a subscription today. You get unlimited access to all the interviews I've conducted. It's completely affordable, and your subscription helps support the work we do here at Talking to Teens. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.